Well, now, in most concerts, this would be a rather early moment to take an interval, but since we're hearing 3 piano concertos, the next of which is the Schumann again, the Duchess will now leave the town hall for the interval.
Well, Paul, I felt that Szokolay gave quite a musical performance.
I think it was very musical. It was very engaging. It was full of marvellous things, particularly the last movement, which is, as I was saying yesterday, a notorious trap for many pianists. It's very, very difficult, much more difficult than it seems and sounds. He confirmed, actually, the impression I got of him in the semi-finals, which is that he's much happier. He seems to be on home ground when the music is very volatile. When it's volatile, when it's bubbly, lots of notes as in the last movement. He's very, very happy, and the electricity takes over. What worries me about him, and it worried me before, is, and I noticed it particularly in the first movement of the Schumann tonight. I mean, the first movement of the Schumann is composed of various presentations of a phrase that goes dee da 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 dee da dee da. Now that last note always came too soon every time he played it, with the result that, I mean, the wind instruments weren't doing it, and he seemed short-breathed all the time. It's, I mean, a singer would be running out of breath at the end of it, and would seem to be landing on the last note too soon. And I got that impression before with the sort of lyrical breadth of a phrase. He always has this tendency to cut it short. Whether that's a nervous thing or a temperamental thing, I don't know, but I'm sure that's the sort of thing the jury will be looking for.
You felt, in one sense, that his presence here, almost on its own, justified the 70-minute slot for the semi-final, didn't you?
Well, as I was saying earlier, he's very unpredictable. And if there hadn't been a 70-minute recital in the semi-finals, I don't think he would have been in the final, because he came along, played the Chopin Barcarolle, which was very nice, very beautiful, then played the Ravel Valse Noble et Sentimentale, which were not, and then suddenly moved into the music of his compatriots, Bartók and Liszt, and it was absolutely fantastic. It really took off.
Well, the Allegro Bárbaro is a wonderful showpiece for a pianist. I'd love to hear a bit of that right now.
Whereabouts in Hungary do you come from?
Budapest.
And did you study there?
Yes, I studied and I lived always, and as well now.
And your father is a composer?
Yes.
What sort of music does he write? Is it very much continuing from Bartók?
It's more in the Bartók way than in the Wien school, the Schubert way. But I think he has his own sound. Especially he writes operas, oratory, vocal things. He wrote 5 operas until now.
I was looking forward to hearing his music last night. What happened to it?
Well, you know, I played too many little pieces, Bartók, and I thought also it was a little long, the program. And to tell the truth, I really was thinking for the Liszt, and I just forgot.
What will he say when you tell him you forgot?
I recorded in the BBC radio anyway. I play a lot of Liszt piece, and I think I played enough 20th century music yesterday. And probably for the public, it was enough, this Bartók.
Paul, do you know the father, the music of Szokolay?
Well, I have to tell you, it's a rather nice coincidence for me because, as you probably know, I began my career by winning a piano competition, the Messiaen Piano Competition in France. And part of the prize for that competition was to play at the Tours Festival. And I had to play the world premiere of a piece for piano and orchestra by his father. That was literally Sándor Szokolay. That was the first piece of music I ever played in public, professionally.
Extraordinary. Yes. Now, this was an ambitious program, as I suppose you might expect from the son of a composer.
Yes, it was a very unusual program as well. I mean, the Bartók and Liszt pieces that he chose were not the most usual. I mean, the Allegro Bárbaro is quite well known. The other Bartók pieces were not. And he chose the piece Venice and Naples by Liszt, which ends with this marvelous Tarantella. And I have to say, there weren't many performances in the semi-finals which literally brought the house down. This did. It was fantastic.
Yes, you know, it really was very exciting when the pianist did set the hall alight, as he certainly did here. Great stuff. I suppose the other all-round virtuoso performance for me was that of Artur Pizarro from Portugal, although he's lived in America for some time. Paul, I think you too were very impressed by this young man.
Well, he, for me, is the other star of this competition. As I was saying, people in the semi-finals played marvellous performances. There really were some marvellous performances. This young man came on and gave a complete recital. Simply like one was not at a competition at all. One was simply at a concert hall listening to a recital by somebody who has his place in the profession already.
I imagine that you're particularly fussy about Debussy. Indeed, I know you are. What did you make of his Debussy playing?
Well, it is my territory. I'm about to record all Debussy's piano music, so there I was sitting there, hypercritical. He began with Debussy Children's Corner, started off the first movement, Dr. Gradus at Parnassum, and I went, ah, and sat back and just listened.
Decided that here we have a pianist.
Yes, here we have a pianist.
Well, here's the very opening of Pizarro's recital, Debussy's Dr. Gradus ad Parnassum. Well, I feel a bit like a car salesman. You can really feel the quality there. I was sitting up at once.
Well, as with the jury, as I told you, I sat next to the jury all the time, and you can tell when they're interested and when they're bored. I mean, normally they follow the score dutifully, they fidget when they're bored, they look back at their notes, they pick their nose, I don't know, anything. On this occasion, the moment he started, all books were closed, and they sat as if at a proper recital, which indeed they were at.
It was a question of technique married to musicality, wasn't it?
Yes. I mean, the interesting thing, and it's a very happy chance, is when the best ear, and this man has the best ear, it actually is married to the best fingers at the same time.
Well, there was more Debussy to prove that, the delightful Gollywog's Cakewalk. I was called Gollywog when I was at school. It's influenced by ragtime, and you need a nice sense of humor. I suppose that what he did was, in addition to the musical qualities we've been talking about, he chose a recital to show off what he could do too.
Well, yes, because
well planned.
Having started out with Debussy, and we knew all the tone and all the colour and all the kind of wonderful lighting that he could produce, which needs the subtlest ear, and as you heard in the wit of Golliwogg's Cakewalk, a marvellous imagination. As I say, one already knew that the fingers were there to produce this.
And we saw that in the last piece, didn't we?
We saw it in the last piece because, I mean, there were all the Opus 25 studies of Chopin, and then Rachmaninoff's Second Sonata, you know, were the cataclysmic passages. I mean, was the kind of technique for that, the big transcendental technique, as good as the subtle technique required for the Debussy? It was.
But in the Rachmaninoff, he didn't actually overdo it, did he?
No. I mean, it's an interesting Rachmaninoff, and I should be very fascinated to see what he does in the concerto. It isn't this demonic kind of Rachmaninoff, this cataclysmic thing. It's dark and it's brooding. It's that side of Rachmaninoff that he looks for all the time.
Well, having heard Pizarro's playing, I must say I was particularly interested to meet him and see just what he was like.
Can you tell me a little bit about why you chose the three pieces you played?
Well, first of all, because I enjoy them immensely. I wanted to give a sort of balance to the program, because I think one of the things the jury looks for, I think, is also how you program your rounds. I think that plays some part in it. And I wanted to give a little bit of everything. You know, the Debussy is not so much the technical piece, even though it demands an enormous amount of control of what you're doing. You know, it's not the notes, it's exactly how you play the few notes that you have. So you have to make the music. You know, if you don't have that, to a certain extent, it all falls. The Rachmaninoff.
You love those long phrases.
Yeah. It's quite schmaltzy at some points. You know.
Yes, but you didn't overdo it.
I hope not.
No. Now, having heard your recital, I would have put my money on your playing the Rachmaninoff in the final. Would that be right?
Rachmaninoff third.
Rachmaninoff third.
Yeah.
Have you played that before with an orchestra?
Played it once before this past summer with Moscow Philharmonic with Dmitry Kitaenko. Was an incredible experience. It was wonderful.
Is it a piece you've had some time to work up?
Yeah, a few years that I've attached myself like glue to this piece. I've grown up listening to this piece. It's one of my very, very favorite works, and I had a professional tape made of this performance, and I'd put it on the radio. Sometimes I'd be driving somewhere, and I'm so used to hearing other people play it. I thought, well, who's this one? And, you know, it's me. My God, I played it. I can't believe it. It was a wonderful experience. Yeah.
Well, it'll be fascinating to see how Pizarro translates his view of Rachmaninoff from solo work to concerto work when he plays number 3 at the end of the program, won't it, Paul?
Well, what fascinates me, it must be obvious in the way I've been speaking about him, I seem to have put him on the pedestal and almost prejudged this competition. It's not prejudged yet. And there's one thing I shall be looking out for particularly, and it's the only slight reservation I have. I'm not sure it's a reservation, but it's just somewhere in the back of my mind. He's only 22, and I'm not quite sure yet how much he's prepared to live dangerously. I'm hoping that the pressure of this occasion is really going to allow him to take the lid right off. So that's what I should be looking out for most. I have every confidence that it's going to be beautiful, passionate, and I want to know just how dangerous it is.
Well, we'll see. Now, as anyone remotely connected with Leeds knows all too well, Fanny Waterman is the human dynamo behind this event, a point that emerges very strongly in a new book which chronicles the history of the Leeds competition, mercifully, warts and all.
There've been many controversies, and it's the first time that I've ever let the cat out of the bag. The one controversy I was involved with, still not a member of the jury, but as one of the founders of the competition with my dear friend Marion, then the Countess of Harwood, and now Mrs. Jeremy Thorpe, was that when the result was given to me, who were going into the finals, I noticed that Radu Lupu's name was missing. We only had 3 finalists in those days, not the 6th, and he was number 5, and I was just horrified. And I addressed the jury and said, "Do you agree this has been a great competition?" And they all nodded and said yes. I said, "Now, if we are going to discourage a talent like Radu Lupu, then it's the last competition I will ever organise." So Clifford Curzon said, "Well, that's the result, and I think we ought to abide by it." I said, "Look, this boy will never be seen on television. He might disappear without trace. Is there not another alternative? Could we perhaps, instead of them playing full concertos, could we perhaps accommodate 5 of them playing 2 movements?" And Sir William Glock saw my point of view immediately and backed me up, and one by one the jury changed their mind. So I'm very pleased that I did interfere on that occasion.
Do you feel that perhaps there are just simply too many competitions now?
I do. We find that competitors are going from one competition to another, and we call them tourists. They never develop their repertoires. They're depending on the same Liszt transcendental studies or the same Chopin studies and the same few sonatas. And so they're going in for competitions which are dead ends, because I say this immodestly, our competition is the greatest in the world, and it is acknowledged even by the people who run the Tchaikovsky competition that it is the greatest competition in the world. And what makes it the greatest competition in the world? First of all, we have wonderful musicians of integrity. They might not be the famous names that we had in the past, but the famous names could be troublemakers. They weren't the greatest members of a jury.
Finally, Fanny, can I ask you whether we can be sure that in 1993 you and your husband Geoffrey will still be beavering away at the Leeds competition?
Definitely. Now, my father died when he was 91, and I have reached the age of 70. Now, Benjamin Franklin said on reaching the age of 70 that from that day forward he was going to get a day younger every day. And I must say, I feel a day younger every day. I've got 21 more years, I hope, and 7 more competitions.
The inextinguishable Fanny Waterman. Now, the 87 competition was dominated by the Russians, Vladimir Ovchinnikov easily winning first prize, and the young Boris Berezovsky showing enormous promise. Indeed, he went on to win a major competition himself. I wondered if he felt his experience here at Leeds had perhaps helped him to win the Tchaikovsky Prize in Moscow. Boris, first of all, congratulations on winning the Tchaikovsky.
Thank you.
I wonder to what extent taking part in the Leeds 2 or 3 years earlier had helped you build up to it.
Right. You know, Leeds competition is very prestigious one, and after winning the 4th prize, the previous competition, I had many concerts in Soviet Union, in England, and that helped really, because musician had to play, had to feel himself musician really playing before the audience, and that was the reason why I think I'm very grateful to Leeds competition.
So it wasn't really a question of mattering that you didn't come first then. It was a good point in your career to have some recognition paid.
Right, right, exactly.
And to what extent do you find Leeds different from Moscow when you did the Tchaikovsky?
Well, in Moscow it was easier for me to play because I was born in Moscow, and anyway, yeah, I knew the stage, I knew many people there, and audience were very kind to me, so they knew already something about it. So it was easier, actually. Yes.
You were a bit more relaxed?
Yeah, right.
Well, it's all very well, these magnificent Russians, but Paul, what about the British talent on display?
Well, the only British person to get through to the semi-final was Andrew Wilde, and in fact he played an incredibly good semi-final recital. I think he surprised us all by beginning with the C minor sonata of Haydn, which was probably the best thing in the recital. It was absolutely beautiful and riveting, and in fact he was going to go on to play Mozart, which I thought had been a curious choice, but didn't think it after hearing that Haydn sonata.
Well, Andrew Wilde sadly is out, but Eric Lesage from France is very much in. He had a very curious posture at the piano, didn't he?
Well, it took me a long time to get onto his wavelength, to work out what his personality was, because he comes onto the platform, sort of looks at us all as if to say, right, folks, we've all got to be here, let's get on with it and make the best of it. He's very tall, but sits high on the piano stool, crouches down over the piano, sucks his lips in grim determination, and actually, the music making is rather serene and relaxed, and it took me quite a while to realize how good he was because of that. There was this barrier I had to break down.
Well, Lesage can certainly play the piano. In fact, he was the only pianist I heard who chose something that sounded as if it had been written in the second half of this century, namely Stockhausen's piano piece number 5. Now, you are, in one sense, unique in this competition because you're the one pianist who's really interpreted the concept of contemporary music as being something post-war. It's true that the Hungarian would have done, but he forgot to play it. But you played Stockhausen.
Yes, I like this music. I can say I like all the contemporary music because sometimes I think it's really ugly. People make ugly sound to make something ugly. But in this kind of music, in Stockhausen, or in sequence of Berlioz, this kind of music is very nice because you have enjoyment of the sound. The sound is a sound of piano. It's not a sound of modern music. You know, it's a very nice sound, and you can create some atmosphere.
Well, I'm sorry to say that in the context of this competition, Paul, that was an extremely daring piece to play.
Yes, I mean, I'm glad somebody took the bull by the horns and actually played a contemporary, actually it's not so contemporary, it's about 40 years old, but it's in the modernist idiom, and he played it marvellously. But obviously he had to go on and demonstrate his capabilities in rather more familiar repertoire. And he went on to the Schubert B-flat Sonata, which was a very daring choice.
Mammoth work.
Mammoth work, very, very testing. But I think you'll see in the third movement the incredible suppleness of his technique.
Well, here's Eric Lesage playing the repeat of the scherzo from the Schubert B-flat Sonata.
Eric Lesage. And now here's Peter Thomas.